Sunday evening once again. Day I look forward to. Yeah. Zechariah chapter 6.
It's 6, huh?
Chapter 6. May the Lord bless the reading of His word tonight. My prayer. This chapter 6, it's one of the more difficult visions that Zechariah saw. This is the 8th vision, and the last vision in the series of 8 here. And we've gone through each of them. And this one is a little bit tricky, but I think we'll get through it without any problem. There's something that's been pressed on me to do, and I'm going to do it as soon as I get through these 8 visions. Once I complete them, I want to do a review of them all in time together, but it'll take a couple more weeks. But I felt the need to talk about something totally unrelated to what we've been discussing. And that is what happens to our souls when we die. Very simple thing in one way, but I felt the need to talk about that, and I'm going to do that in a couple of weeks, I guess. But that's coming up. I want to go through this as thorough as I can. I mean, some others say, well, I know what I have to do. Maybe we do. But I think there's usually more things that meets the eye. And we'll discuss this some. And this will take a couple of sessions to do. But for some reason, that's been on my mind, and I'm going to do that when I finish these 8 visions. I don't want to leave these undone. But we'll see how far we go, and then I want to tie all these 8 together. And it'll be 2 or 3 more weeks. But anyway, tonight we're in Zechariah chapter 6, and this vision is of the 4 chariots, and this is lies in the future somewhere. Some generation, this is going to mean a lot to us. It might not mean much to us tonight, but these things can start to break at any time. So these could become important even in our lives. I'll read verses 1 through 8. And I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, there came 4 chariots out from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were mountains of brass. In the first chariot were red horses, and in the second chariot black horses, and in the third chariot white horses, and in the 4th chariot grizzled and bay horses. Then I answered and said unto the angel that talked with me, What are these, my Lord? And the angel answered and said unto me, These are the 4 spirits of the heavens, which go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth. The black horses which are therein go forth into the north country, and the white go forth after them, and the grizzled go forth toward the south country. And the bay went forth and sought to go, that they might walk to and fro through the earth. And he said, Get ye hence, walk to and fro through the earth. So they walked to and fro through the earth. Then cried he upon me, and spake unto me, saying, Behold, these that go toward the north country have quieted my spirit in the north country. we'll start with this lesson, and I don't know how far we'll get, but we'll go as far as time allows. Now, the last vision was the beginning of the building of Babylon, the city of Babylon. It's going to one day be built. You can read about it in the book of Revelation. We can read about it here. The land of Shinar is where Babylon stood, and that's where it will be rebuilt. We discussed that quite thoroughly, and we must place Babylon at the center of this prophecy. This isn't a continuation of what we have already discussed. This is about some events that surround the building of Babylon. Now, some people say, oh, Babylon's not going to be rebuilt. It will destroy, but they are so wrong. The Medes and the Persians, when they took Babylon, they used the city. So did the Greeks. So Babylon will be destroyed just as the book of Revelation says it will be destroyed. Verse 1. Zechariah says, and I turned and lifted up my eyes and looked. Back in 5:1, Zechariah also turned and lifted up his eyes and looked. He changed directions. The prophet seemed to be looking in a different direction altogether. Back in verse 5 was a vision of a flying scroll, and it was unrolled. It was 30 feet by 15 feet, and it covered the entire earth. It flew around the entire earth. So this vision here is about outside of the nation Israel. He is not talking about the nation Israel here. He's looking beyond that. He's looking into the Gentile age. He's looking beyond the nation of Israel. He turned and looked in a different direction. And like the flying scroll, it says, this is a curse that goes forth over the face of the whole earth. See, it was beyond the boundaries of Israel. And so is this. And we'll see that more as we progress through this. It looks into the time of the building of Babylon, which was what the previous visions were. This is a continuation of that. And some events that occurred around that period of time. I would not be surprised one little bit if I, in my lifetime, saw the beginning of the building of Babylon. And we talked about some of the signs of the times, and I believe that they are in line now for that, but it could just be shadows of things to come. I don't know, but I would not be surprised if I saw the beginning of the building of Babylon in my lifetime. Then it says there in that verse 1, behold, there came forth 4 chariots out from between 2 mountains. 4 chariots, the prophet sees, come thundering out from between 2 mountains. Now, these mountains I place outside of Israel, and I will explain that. They're not in Israel, they're on the outside of Israel. But mountains stand for kingdoms He saw a stone cut out of a mountain without hands, and it became a great mountain. That stone became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. Speaking of the kingdom of Christ in the millennial age, see, the word mountain is often used to describe a kingdom. King David said in the 30th Psalm, Lord, by thy favor thou hast made my mountain to stand strong, speaking of his kingdom. So these two mountains here in verse 1, these four chariots come out from between, are two kingdoms. And the mountains were made of brass, verse 1 says. So now we've got a picture in our mind. Two mountains, two brass mountains, and four chariots pulled by horses come thundering out from between these two mountains. Now, this brass is actually bronze, if you work on that word some. It's two bronze mountains. Now, bronze is an impure metal.
Yeah.
It is made from copper and tin.
Yeah.
Very formable, very malleable metal. You find it not in use much today. You'll find it in antique shops or these little shops where little things are made that look like they're old. You find a lot of that made out of bronze because it's so workable and you can solder it so easily. But these two mountains are made out of bronze and impure metal. You know, looking back on the previous vision, we saw two women coming forth, and they had wings of storks. And they picked this bushel basket up and they carry it to Shinar, where Babylon is going to be rebuilt. Wings of storks. Storks, too, is an unclean, impure bird. So I believe that these two mountains are the same two nations represented by the storks, because those women with wings of storks represent two strong nations, strong enough to arrange for commerce. That's what a bushel basket stands for, is commerce. No matter where you go on this planet, a bushel basket means commerce. Two nations carried commerce to the land of Shinar. Here we have the same two impure nations standing, and four chariots coming forth out of these two nations. And they're represented by brass. Brass, or bronze, is also a metal of judgment. You find it connected to judgment in Scripture. Now, the building of Babylon, it is going to be a judgment on this planet. It's going to start off as being a great idea. You know, it's going to fulfill prophecy, but a lot of things that happen that seem to be good at the time ends up in judgment. So this certainly does fit the judgments of God. Now, some will say that these mountains are in Israel, that they're Mount Olive, Mount Zion or something. I don't think Mount Olive or Mount Zion would be represented by bronze and impure metal. Inexpensive metal, actually. I think it would be represented by gold and silver. You know, gold means purity, nobility. Silver is for atonement. That's what these medals are tied to in prophecy and scriptures. I will place these mountains outside of Israel, and I will place them as being two Gentile nations, that the same two that carry commerce to Babylon. The same two nations. Whichever two they are, I don't know which two they will be. I believe the United States will be one, because that's in Iraq. We certainly have influence in Iraq. The other one, I don't know. I would probably guess England or Russia. I don't know. But we'll wait and see. We just could very well see this take place. The whole area over there now is neutralized, and this could take place. Then in verse 2, it says, in the first chariot were red horses, and in the second chariot, black horses. Now, red horses in the book of Revelation, you know, there's 4 horsemen there. Red means war, and it usually does war and blood. And black, famine, hard times, dark days. But the first chariot was red horses. Now, these chariots, some would say that they're war chariots, but all chariots wasn't used for war. I don't believe they were war chariots. I believe they were messenger chariots, because one of the chariots was pulled by white horses, which means peace. I don't believe these were war chariots. I believe they were messenger chariots. Of course, you all know that I'm like Tigger the Tiger. I like to be different, but I'm the only one. Now, and in the second chariot was black horses, which would mean famine, according to Revelation, the 4 horsemen of Revelation. And in verse 3, and it says, and in the third chariot were white horses. And white horses, white always means peace and purity. And I believe it does here too. And in the 4th chariot, grizzled and bay horses. Those are words we're not used to using, grizzled especially. We're not used to that word. But I looked it up, and it means spotted, as if paint was falling on it, hail was falling, and it was a spotted horse. I imagine, I don't think I've ever seen one like that. I always loved the Appaloosa horse, but I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like that. But that's what it means, spotted, as if with hail, striped. The bay is a strong color, as if red, but it means a strong horse. It's what a bay horse is. It's a piece of strength. And now Jacob, that word grizzled appeared in Jacob's cattle when he was separating the cattle. His cattle from his uncle Laban's cattle. That word appears there. The grizzled cattle he took. But there are the 4 horses that come out from between these 2 nations that's represented by brass. Then, I'll read 4 and 5. Then I answered and said unto the angel that talked with me, what are these, my Lord? And the angel answered and said unto me, these are the 4 spirits of the heavens, which go forth from standing before the Lord of the earth. The 4 spirits of the heavens. Heavens is a space between here and heaven. It's the skies. This is what the heavens is. These represent spirits that go forth in the four heavens. These are the four spirits of the heavens. And they live in that space. You know, if you was to take the four things that these forces represent, that I just talked about, if you was to take them out of the current events today, there wouldn't be much left. If you was to take war and famine and peace, and you wouldn't, that makes up our world, really. But the four spirits that live in the heavens, and they are manipulating the current events of this day of the building of Babylon. They will represent. Now, if we live to see this day, and I believe some of us could, I just feel that way. Yeah. I even feel like I could, and I wasn't born yesterday. I believe that the current events of that day would fit this scripture right here. I believe that it would. This is why we have prophecy to guide us through these events, so we will be on the cutting edge of world events. That's where we belong, on the cutting edge. We always belong on the cutting edge. Because I like to say, there are no people on this earth today that is more on the cutting edge than a Christian.
Amen.
We're always on the cutting edge. We have to be on the cutting edge. This is where we're at. We are more advanced in knowledge and wisdom than any people on the face of the earth. And we always have been. And we always will be. That's just all there is to it. People can say what they want to say, but that's the truth. And the more we're into this word, the more on the cutting edge we are. Who is more advanced than we are? Who out there? No one is the answer to that. But these make up the planets, the events of planet Earth. And it says there in verse 5, which go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth. Now these four chariots go forth from standing before the Lord of all the earth. You know, we've read about, we spent a lot of time on the two olive trees that we read about in the previous, back in chapter 4. We spent a lot of time there. Now, in the book of Revelation says, these are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of all the earth. You know, so these four stand before the Lord of all the earth, waiting for the command. Waiting for the command to go forth and to do the work of the Lord. The black horses, which are therein, in verse 6, go forth to the north country. Now the north country, from Babylon, from Shinar, from Iraq, depending on where you're at in Iraq, along the Euphrates River there, the north country could be Russia, it could be Turkey, it could even be Iran. But the black horses go forth towards the north country. They are the dark days. They are bringing the dark days. But the white horse go forth after them. The white bringing peace and famine to an end would be my guess on that. And the green will go forth toward the south country. The south country being Saudi Arabia. And the bay and the drizzle went forth, and they desired to go around the whole world. And indeed they did. They were given the authority to do that after finishing the work in the South Country. Whatever work that may have been, it doesn't seem like there were very much problems in Saudi Arabia. So they went around the whole world. And I take these to be the negotiators for the building of Babylon that we just came out of. I think we have to stick these two visions together, and they're at the same time. One thing we have noticed is that the red horses wasn't sent forth. They wasn't sent any place. War. No need for war. This was a time of earthly peace. And the building of Babylon is started during a time of earthly peace. So the red horses was kept and was not sent forth. This is somewhat puzzling, but at the same time, there was no need for war during this time. Because Babylon couldn't be built during the time of war, if you really think about it. Then in verse 8, and I'll wind up with this. Then cried he unto me and spake unto me, saying, now the angel shouted this to the prophet. He shouted these words to the prophet. Behold, these that go forth towards these north country have quieted my spirit in the north country. They have settled the problems in the north country, where whichever nation that be, Russia, Turkey, Iran, maybe all three, I don't know. But that's the three that lay north of the land of Shinar. And the Lord's Spirit is quieted. They have done the Lord's work. And the work will continue on. And I believe that that work is related to the previous vision, the building of Babylon. The generation that lives when this takes place is still not there in the future. When this takes place, they will recognize this with perfection. We can't recognize it today with perfection. But they will, because they'll live it. They'll live it in that day. And I hope I'm alive when I see this happen. But I'm going to lift up my head and praise the Lord for me to be able to live long enough to see this prophecy unfold.